These two guys were meant for each other. It's the ultimate pairing.
Roy Jones had come through a fire.
What a performance now by Jones, reaching deep.
And won the first fight. Everybody in the arena thought Antonio Tarver had won. It was a perfect setup for a rematch.
You got any excuses tonight, Roy?
And down goes Jones on a hard left hand, and that is the most that Roy Jones has ever been hurt.
We were all stunned. It just couldn't have happened. I mean, this was Roy Jones Jr.
Antonio Tarver's entire career has been, in his mind, a collision course with Roy Jones.
The day I started training him, he told me he's going to be the one that beat Roy Jones.
I had to knock the guy out. It's the only way I was going to solidify my legacy.
This is an interesting fight because of Roy Jones. Why is he doing this?
He wants to show everybody that I'm still Roy Jones Jr. They should fear me. I'm going to show you why.
I think Roy Jones has to know once and for all, I'm better than Antonio Tarver.
This is what I would call the last chapter.
We both know that he who walks away the winner is a better man.
All you non-believers out there, it's written.
It's a life or death sport.
It's my destiny.
And there's nothing nobody outside can do to interfere with that.
Can't be denied.
Nothing nobody outside can do to help the other person.
Won't be denied.
Remember, son, it's kill or die.
Roy Jones is a complex of pride and ego, fears, was blessed with extraordinary athletic talent, which was funneled into the sport of boxing, a high achiever who achieved everything, being a prima donna along the way. But when you can do it, it ain't bragging, as they say.
Roy was born in '69, January, here in Pensacola.
He could have been a great football player, basketball player, but his father had him into boxing.
I probably started about two, 3, somewhere like that.
Roy's father is the devil, in a way. He's the Svengali who turns on his pupil. He's an over-controlling monster of some sort, at least in the way the story has been presented by popular media.
Big Roy put up a little ring behind the house on the farm and just invited local kids to come over and actually treated the local kids who came over better than he treated his son. His way of making a man was to be harsh.
Boxing is a rough sport. My methods and my technique, was necessary because that's what brought out the best in him.
Big Roy had the PVC pipe in his fists and sometimes an extension cord. Chasing Roy on his road work, or when he made one little mistake, he was going to feel the lash on the back of his calves.
That was the way I was most productive. You know what I mean? So I don't care what people say. You know what I mean? You let them produce something. Yeah.
I love my father. I wanted to be like my father, but my father was so aggressive until I didn't want to share anything. I was afraid I might get a whipping.
Little boy was so scared that he kept a switchblade in his pocket. That was his last resort. He thought of killing himself or killing his father.
My uncles and their friends and relatives fought chickens. I guess you would say it's just a tradition in my family.
If you go to visit Roy Jones, it was all about gamecocks. I mean, they were everywhere. They were screaming everywhere you went, and he'd pick them up. He'd love them. He'd talk to you. He'd coo to them. He'd talk to you about them all the time. I mean, he was fascinated by them.
What I like about the chickens is that they believe is that what's theirs is theirs. That space is theirs. So when I go in the ring, that space is mine. That's what I can closely relate to myself. He's beautiful. He's very colorful. He's like proud. He's a warrior that's willing to die for what he believes. So his fans can put their money on him because he's going to give his life before he lets the other guy beat him. And that's what a boxer has to have if you really want to be a good boxer. Now, if you want to be ordinary average, you ain't got to have that in mind. But if you want to be great, that's what you got to have.
He imitates them. He literally, he's picking up clues from them and he's taking them into the ring.
When you watch the chickens do their thing, you learn if you know what you're looking at.
Once upon a time, Antonio Tarver was one of those enigmas we find in sports. Talented, unfulfilled potential. And somewhere along the way, he was galvanized to take advantage of what he had as an athlete to become a champion. And he's a champion.
Well, you know, I'm the Magic Man, born and raised in the Magic City of Orlando, Florida, West Orlando, a very, very tough neighborhood. Ivy Lane, they call it the Pork and Bean Projects. We stayed a block from the project. Well, my mom was a single parent. She raised 4 kids on her own. When you look at some of the sacrifices she had to make, you know, I consider her a real superwoman.
Antonio's father, yes, did leave when he was very young. He was like in the war and Vietnam and things like that, and it's just one thing led to another.
I hung out with the older guys because I just, you know, wanted to be respected.
He was nice, but mean. He wasn't a troublemaker, but a lot of trouble came to him, and that's just basically the meanness come out. My mom heard about the boys' club. She went and checked it out and started sending him there to basically keep him out of trouble.
Lester Sears would punish us by, you know, if you get into a fight, you want to duke it out in the ring.
One thing about Antonio is that he was fast. He had quick hands, and he was a lefty.
When Lester Sears called me, he saw something natural. Because the first thing he said to me, no kid could hit a bag like that without being trained for it.
Roy Jones and I first met in the Sunshine State Games in 1983, and it was a heated contest. We won like a split decision. That fight really told me I had what it takes to compete, and if not, you know, beat the guy.
Antonio was with me up until he was around 13 years old. Then his mom moved to East Orlando. He quit boxing and started playing football and basketball.
I thought I would get a full ride scholarship like a lot of athletes, but I had a rude awakening, and when I look at it now, I can truly say that I wasn't good enough. I had my son to support. You know, I was still living with my mom, and so, you know, it was real tough for me.
The drugs came, I guess he felt like that was nothing else, you know. I know he was very depressed.
Oh my God, it was the worst time. You know, I think I've relived that moment that I found out over and over in my brain. He said, Mom, he said, what I'm gonna tell you gonna hurt you real bad. He told me it would hurt me very bad. I'm on drugs, and the type of drugs I'm on is very addictive. I say, what kind of drugs are those? Addictive? You know, first I'm in shock. You know, drugs? You know, I'm thinking, well, hey, weed? No. I'm on something that's very addictive. He said it's called, you know, crack cocaine.
It took rehabilitation to really find myself once again. And what I had to hold on to was just the love of my family, the strength of my mom, and the support that I had from them. In '88, once I witnessed Roy Jones do the things that he did in the Olympics, I mean, that really, truly inspired me.
The Olympics was one of the best experiences of my life. For the first time, I was away from even my father.
He came alive when he went to Seoul, Korea. He learned that he could exist outside of that bubble, that furnace that had been created on that farm outside of Pensacola. You have all these inner city kids, and it turns out that this backwoods guy becomes a leader. They saw he was tougher than all of them.
Roy Jones was clearly the outstanding boxer at the Seoul Olympics in 1988. He was as great-looking as any American amateur boxer since Sugar Ray Leonard, maybe since Muhammad Ali.
Roy did very well throughout the tournament. He never had any problems, you know, unanimous decision in every fight that he fought.
Fought his best fight at the Olympics in the final against a Korean boxer before a largely Korean crowd in Seoul.
Roy dominated the fight. Counter-punch, didn't get hit, used good ring gentlemanship, landed bigger punches.
I was charting the fight for NBC. The fight's over. You know the fight's in the bag. It's just a matter of getting the gold medal.
I knew I had him, but then me and the referee were standing there waiting, and I hear these Koreans start screaming at this table. I said, no, I can't believe this. The referee was even whispering to me. He said, they got to be out of their mind. He said, I just don't believe this is even about to happen. Boy, it's tough, man. It's very tough.
It's kind of hard to describe, you know what I mean, without vulgarity, you know what I mean? I looked at his dad. I was in back of him. I looked at his dad. He shook his head and dropped his head. It's a weird feeling like somebody had taken something out of me.
After all these years still, you know, they come back and give the skating team their gold medals and different things, different situations, and they still don't want to give me my gold medal when they know clearly that he lost. He even admitted that he lost.
Roy Jones was voted the outstanding boxer in the games, but he didn't get a gold medal because of the corrupt decision in the championship fight. Years later, judges admitted that they had been paid for that decision.
Antonio's laying on his couch, and he says to himself, what's Roy Jones doing fighting for Olympic gold? I should be fighting for the Olympic gold.
You know, my whole thing was that I'm going to get that gold medal that eluded Roy Jones. I was the only fighter in the world to win the Pan Am Games, the national championships, and the world championships all in 1 year in 1995. You know, it was unprecedented.
He's the favorite to win the '96 Olympics.
He got a bad decision with Vasily Girov, and he got the bronze medal as opposed to the gold.
All of a sudden, he's not the gold medal winner, he's the bronze medal winner. He's not the guy that has $1 million guarantee with Bob Arum, but all of a sudden, he's back in Orlando, and he is at Scratch Street.
Roy Jones arrived in professional boxing as a larger figure than any other recent post-Olympic amateur.
He was a brilliant virtuoso who improvised his own style because of his extraordinary athletic ability and quickness and intelligence in the ring.
I actually signed Roy Jones to his first professional contract, and shortly I saw it was a big conflict going on between Roy Sr. and Roy Jr. that I didn't know of.
I was getting calls all the time, give us Roy Jones in a championship. And Sr. would always say, he's not ready, he's not ready. I think he had problems letting him become the man that he became.
I think the problem was Roy Jones Sr. and Roy Jones Jr. are very much alike. They both like to have control over things.
The big breakup occurred over Roy Sr. shooting Roy Jr.'s dog.
Little Roy had a Rottweiler that he was going to use to breed with. And so it's a very hot day. The Rottweiler is crouched under Little Roy's trailer. And Little Roy's little sister runs up, and the dog jumps out and bites her. Really bad gash. Roy's mother rushes to the hospital. Big Roy goes into the house, gets a gun, and blows away the dog. Shoots him 3 times. He goes back in the house, gets another gun, and shoots him 2 more times. This is after the fact. And so when Little Roy comes home and hears what's happened, he goes and gets a gun. He's going to kill his old man. It's finally he's decided this is it. He can't take it anymore. And the 2 men, Big Roy pulls up in his Jeep right next to Little Roy. They're both sitting in cars. Big Roy says, just killed your dog. And it just hangs there in the air. Little Roy's sitting there with his gun right in his lap. And he's just about to do it. And finally he just decides it's not worth it. And the moment passes. The 2 men break for good at that point.
Here we go.
90s was all Roy Jones Jr.
For a decade, he was the Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali of the sport. I mean, he just totally dominated the sport with no peer.
Roy Jones was ruthless. He didn't give a damn about no interviewing. He didn't give a damn about talking to nobody. He didn't give a damn about being on TV. He wanted to win.
There were some modern fans who enjoyed seeing him strut and dress and rap, play basketball, and do all the things that he could casually do to go along with the boxing, because while boxing is hard for everybody else, it was easy for Roy Jones.
Antonio was a guy, at the time, people thought he was the best fighter. I knew I was better than him, so it was just a matter of me going out showing the world.
Left hook, and down goes Tony.
They said James Toney won 2 rounds. I didn't see it.
That fight was over in round 1. He made it look like, frankly, there was nobody in his league, because some people thought Tony was the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport.
So I used my head, outsmarted him, put a few chicken moves on him, beat him too.
Over and over and over, he would go into the ring and make paid prize fights look like easy sparring sessions, and the arc, the drama, was Roy's career and Roy's persona, not Roy's fights. Roy's fights, by and large, were just incidental material in the continuing development of a larger story.
Nobody wanted him when he came out of the Olympics, and he couldn't find a promoter, and he had to go the hard route.
His pro career didn't take off with the kind of force that Roy's did, and it's always been eating at him.
I'm calling around. Bob Arum, and he's got me on call block. Nobody's calling me back, and he just starts fighting these small fights, $7,500, one at a time. He's broke. He's living in an apartment, sleeping on the floor. I'm still, writing checks. I'm like, Tarver, when does this thing end? And he's like, John, I'm going to be the world champion. I'm like, okay. So we kept going.
I knew this in my heart. If they couldn't beat me, they couldn't stop me. And eventually I knew the doors would come crumbling down.
When I saw him, I knew he was a diamond in the rough, and he just had to have the opportunities.
I think my skill and ability in the ring is very deceptive because I take my time. I take my time, I figure the guy out. Once I got him figured out, then it'll be over shortly thereafter.
He was just on the brink of getting that shot with Roy Jones Jr. I think he had been waiting for his whole life.
His jaw's broken. He loses in a decision.
That loss took away what he was so close to getting, like being, just about to grab the prize and somebody snatches it away from you. And that's what Eric Harding did to him. He wanted to punish Eric Harding for the fact that he lost a decision to him. He wanted to get back in there, beat Eric Harding, and show the world that nobody could beat him.
That was a huge shot. Down goes Harding for the second time.
The Harding fight, he just, came out. He had an entirely different frame of mind for that fight than he did for the first one.
Roy Jones, come on, baby. You next, Roy. You next, baby. You can't run now.
Tarver didn't have a stellar career, but he had no control over that. Roy Jones was the man. Roy Jones, he was always going to be in Roy Jones's shadow.
When you can go to someone and say, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world, that just carries a panache to it that not many other titles do.
Roy could go beat John Ruiz and claim to be a legitimate middleweight champion who had gone up and won a heavyweight title.
John Ruiz was a heavyweight with a good punch, but it's just like me with my back against the wall, or I feel like people think I can't do something when I want to do it most.
That was the first time that Roy ever fought and didn't have to lose weight.
He fought the fight in typical Roy Jones fashion, ring generalship, controlling the pace of the fight, getting in and out of the action.
When he beat Ruiz, that to me was the capping of his career.
After Roy won the heavyweight championship of the world over John Ruiz, there was Tarver at the press conference yelling and screaming that he wanted his opportunity.
I had to address this guy because I don't think he would have ever fought me if I wouldn't have. And I looked him right in his eyes. I say, Roy Jones Jr.
How much do I have to go through? Who do I have to beat in order for me to get my opportunity at history? All right, where's the contract, Roy? I'm ready.
Roy Jones was simmering. He started on a slow boil.
I don't give a damn. We don't even fight for no title. We fight for this. I don't care what it is. I'm fighting him for something.
I remember, him calling me up and he says, I'm under his skin. I'm going to fight Roy Jones Jr.
Roy went up and won a heavyweight belt with very little risk. Anything else he was going to do in the heavyweight division would have involved a greater risk. By far the lesser risk was to go back down to light heavyweight and fight somebody whom he thought he had in his hip pocket mentally for 2 decades.
I just knew it was my time now. It was my time to shine, and I have my opportunity. And that was an opportunity that I wasn't going to let slip through my fingers.
It was a bad fight for me because I'm coming from winning the heavyweight title. Now I'm coming back strictly to make history, but it's not really something I totally was interested in. But I told him I would do it, so I wanted to do it.
He thought it was a possibility we might get a fight with Tyson. He said, well, I'm going to stay right here, because if I had to fight Tyson, I'll have my weight already. I don't have to worry about putting any weight back on anything. And then when he found out that that wasn't going to happen, and we had to fight Tarver, it was like, I got to get the weight off.
Coming for 200 pounds of pure muscle, I never did that before. Then to come back down, and at 34 years old, it took a lot more out of me than I expected it to.
Everybody thought it was something, that never has been done before in boxing. A fighter having to sweat down and make weight.
The bulk of these people are here to honor Roy Jones, the most gifted fighter of his generation.
I thought if you don't get this guy out of there early, it's going to be a real struggle.
Roy did not look good. Roy was on the ropes a lot. He was getting beat. I've never seen him take that kind of a beating.
Tarver went at Jones in spurts, and even by his own admission, said he could have been more aggressive, but sometimes he believed Roy was playing possum.
I felt like I fought off pure heart that night.
What a performance now by Jones, reaching deep.
I remember when Roy Jones Jr. was circling that ring, he knew he was beaten. He knew, you could look in his eyes, he was looking down. And then the decision came in.
He pulled the fight off, not impressive, but we won.
Everybody in the arena thought Tarver had won because they were treated to the spectacle of watching him take Roy to the ropes and threaten Roy like Roy had never been threatened before. Those rounds which Tarver won, he clearly won. He spectacularly won. He captured the crowd. He won the event. It was a perfect setup for a rematch.
I think Roy didn't like where the first fight went, so showing the great champion that he is. He came back to fight Antonio to prove that he wasn't himself the first fight.
When we came together and Jay Nady asked us, do you have any questions? Roy said no. And he asked me, do you have any questions? Well, by golly, I had a question.
You got any excuses tonight, Roy? Let's not ask questions like that. Let's touch gloves and go to work. Tonight, Roy?
It was a brilliant psychological ploy.
I'd never seen a fighter take advantage of that moment.
For the first round, I knew Roy did what I expected him to do, which was come out and try to get Antonio's respect.
First round really way too easy. Way out in front of him. Way too quick, way too sharp. Couldn't touch me the first round. It was too much for him.
I assumed that that was going to be another Roy Jones decision where he goes out and wins 9, 10, 11 rounds.
So I said, look, you're giving this guy too much respect. I knew that would piss him off. Don't give him that much respect. Okay, when he's backing you up, stay low.
Using that word, respect.
Okay, baby, so you know what you do? Then let's go out there and get yours.
The second round, I came out more aggressive.
Roy was coming out trying to set the tone, trying to set the pace. He shot a right hand. Missed, and he went to shoot another one, and Antonio came right down the pipe.
It's one of those sweet shots, man. It's one of those Barry Bonds like home runs. Effortless.
Caught him with a good shot. Only shot he landed the whole fight. One mistake.
And I said, well, he'll jump back up. And then when he finally stood up and he started staggering, it was over. It was just silence. Nobody understood.
It really touched me because I felt at that time like I did in Vietnam when some of my fellow soldiers went down.
Roy was looking to get a belt, so he went to try and get a belt with Glenn Johnson. And he figured he'd win a 12-round decision. I think everybody did, because Johnson's a tough guy. He's going to be there. He's experienced.
Roy was getting in. Roy, do something. I was yelling, do something. It was as if there just wasn't anything there. I was thinking, well, he's just laying back, waiting.
Like he still can't tell how I went down from that punch, but it happened.
He's not going to get up, and he's been knocked out again.
We had a long period of time where Roy stayed on the canvas.
Certainly looking at that figure on the canvas in that state, you wouldn't have thought that that's a person who should fight again.
Once Johnson knocked out Roy Jones, the fight between Tarver and Johnson became a natural. Tarver did the same thing Roy Jones did. He took Glenn Johnson for granted. Johnson walked away with the decision.
Antonio is about as good as it gets when it comes to fighting somebody a second time. He's Mr. Rematch.
Tonight, Johnson is having much more difficulty.
After Tarver beat Glenn Johnson, it cleared the way for Tarver Jones 3.
There are a lot of people who don't want Roy to be fighting this fight that's coming up.
I attribute that loss to Glenn Johnson to the fact that Roy fought too soon after suffering very devastating, physically damaging knockout, I believe, and therefore he was not able to take a good punch.
I've never seen a great fighter knocked cold, and I saw Roy Jones knocked cold twice in a row.
The fact that he was knocked out 2 times close together, he may have suffered, which I have from my experience, so, which is like a permanent little damage to the brain, which sometimes happens when fighters get knocked out close together, and they never will be able to take a punch good after that.
We're competent and educated enough to not put Roy in harm's way, and he's not going to put himself in harm's way.
All great champions have to prove something, whether it's to themselves, to the fans. I think this is Roy's proving it to himself. He's a proud man, so he's got to go out there and do this. This one he's doing for Roy.
Couldn't live with myself. I didn't go back one more time. You better see me jump off a building, or you better see me fight.
He's a fighting cock, and a fighting cock fights till he dies, till he drops.
This is what I would call the last chapter of a storybook ending.
One of them will leave that ring having wasted 20 years figuring out who's better.
It was destined to be a trilogy.
Roy can't take any chances with Antonio Tarver. He needs to be his absolute best, and that's why Dad is back.
My dad came in and said, look, I just want to help. Because I got you in this, I feel like it's my duty to come help.
But I've never been nowhere. I've been right there all the time. If he had needed me at any time, all he had to do was just snap his finger. No matter what they wrote, or what they wrote he said, or whatever they said, you know. I'm his father, I'll always be there.
Roy Sr. probably the only person that truly can understand my style of fighting enough to be able to come in and critique it to get it toned back up.
There are some changes, technical changes.
And with a tune-up, I mean, it's going to be really hard to freaking deal with me.
We're about to find out whether Antonio Tarver has Roy Jones's number.
I'm going to knock him out because I don't trust the judges.
The bottom line is that no matter what Roy does, Antonio's going to have an answer for it.
The nerve of Roy Jones, thinking he's going to come into my backyard and upset me.
You won the last one, we'll do it, make it right. We'll come do it right there in your hometown. So now, you talking about no excuses, there's really no excuses.
So I think they're looking at it as an advantage for Roy. I think they're looking at that Antonio might get so caught up in the hype that his focus might be off of Roy and more on the hype of fighting in his hometown. Why else would they put it in Tampa?
If Roy Jones gets knocked out by Antonio Tarver on October 1st, he will no longer be considered among the greats of all time in boxing. If he knocks out Antonio Tarver, there are no more questions. That's it.
No excuses. Who era is this? Is it my era or is it Roy Jones Jr. era?